to the extent that I had to assume Reid and Gerard were building decks together.
Yeah, some of the players did sort themselves into teams for this event, and it wouldn't be surprised if they worked together. But we are underway with game one. Gerard's going to start on a Thoughtseize up a Pain land, so he does go to 17, but we get to see Reid's grip. He's kept 2 lands, 2 mana creatures in the Sylvan Caryatid and Satyr Wayfinder, and then the mid-range Courser of Krufix, and 2 late game cards, Doomwake Giant and Hornet Queen.
So the card that really stands out to me in this opening hand is Courser of Krufix. The top half of Reid's hand is very expensive. The rest of it's kind of just mana, and Courser is a way to generate a lot of card advantage. The problem with taking the Courser here is that if Reid draws Whip of Erebos, the rest of his hand is really well situated to capitalize on that card.
Yeah, it's worth noting that both of Reid's lands come into play tapped here, so this is actually a relatively slow hand that he has. If he doesn't hit an untapped land in these first 2 turns, he's not going to do anything until turn 3.
Though it is a slow matchup, so it's unlikely to punish him very much.
Gerard does have an untapped land, second Pain land. This will be Satyr Wayfinder. The flip will reveal a land. It's a Temple of Deceit. He also has the option of Opulent Palace, but goes with the Temple.
I believe Gerard, if I'm looking correctly, mulliganed to start this game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that's
unusual.
I mean, that might actually be a 6-card hand.
I mean, you see that a lot of times with his deck choices, especially something like the Sultai Reanimator deck, is a deck that's pretty forgiving in a lot of its hands. You know, if you have 2 lands and a Satyr Wayfinder, you can keep almost anything. And we'll get to see what Gerard did keep here. Reid's going to fire off a Thoughtseize of his own. It looks like you're right. He is down the card here. He does have land 3 and land 4, which you saw him take, and the 2 cards are Satyr Wayfinder and Hornet Queen.
No particular critical piece of this hand, so Gerard is low on resources, but this Thoughtseize doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, Reid does have the ability to leave Gerard with just lands. I mean, Satyr Wayfinder in a lot of ways is another land. But you see, Reid goes ahead and actually takes the Wayfinder, knowing that the Hornet Queen's a long ways off.
Another part of this is just respect for the possibility of drawing Whip of Erebos, because if either player finds it, they are firmly in the front seat. So a lot of these decisions, even though they look a little unorthodox, is out of respect for Whip of Erebos.
Funny you should mention it, because before the turn, Gerard's draw was nothing other than Whip of Erebos. So that play by Reid to take the Satyr Wayfinder, he's going to really get rewarded for that.
Absolutely. Imagine if that Hornet Queen's in the graveyard. I mean, this could be a very, very quick game for Gerard.
Yeah, and we'll see 4th land, and Gerard's going to get Whip of Erebos on the table, wants it there before Reid has a chance to Thoughtseize it. Of note, on Reid's turn, he made Sylvan Caryatid, but did not play a 3rd land, so Reid's going to be pretty slow this game.
And remember, the Courser already got stripped out of his hand, too.
Draw for Reid Duke. Does he find land 3? It's his second shot at it. He has Sultai Charm. That'll take care of the Whip of Erebos. So Reid stuck on lands, but is able to tread water pretty well here. And Gerard not going to let up. He draws another whip and makes that one on the table.
Perfect draw for Gerard. Although still without mana of his own. Remember, Hornet Queen's still stranded in his hand. Another card that I believe Gerard has picked up is Pharika, God of Affliction, which game 1 is so powerful. Either getting extraneous stuff out of Gerard's own graveyard or attacking Reid's graveyard in the event that he finds Whip of Erebos.
Well, Reid had hoped to find land 3 on top of his deck that turn. He drew a Courser of Krufix. You see there the top card is Hornet Queen, so he's not going to get to draw a land next turn, but he will get a shot at another card. Maybe he can find one.
Though the pace of this game is shaping up to be pretty slow, and Gerard, with a whip in play and a Hornet Queen in hand, not that far off from getting it on top of this Pharika he's about to play.
Yeah, the game's slow, but eventually things do happen. You can't tread water forever. And there is the copy of Pharika, God of Affliction, that you mentioned. Right now, 5 mana symbols for Gerard, so it is not turned into a creature just yet, but it's getting pretty close.
And this is another card showing a lot of respect for the possibility of whip mirror matches in this tournament. Usually we only see Pharikas in people's sideboards, but Reid and Gerard playing in the main.
You see still no help for Reid. Whip of Erebos was the top card of his deck. He'll play Satyr Wayfinder, does finally find him a land and a copy of a forest. Flips the top card, it's another Whip of Erebos, but he does get to play forest for the turn. And with the whip on top of his deck, you think maybe there's a chance that Reid can stabilize here?
It's going to be tough because Pharika is going to put a lot of pressure on both Reid and Reid's graveyard.
Yeah, Whip, because of the Pharika, Whip will just be a life gain tool for Reid. He won't really be able to bring any creatures back.
It's going to be much easier for Gerard to maximize his Whip than it will be for Reid's.
For Gerard there, on end step, he makes a snake token. Correct that the snake does also have Death Touch. It's one of the black-green snakes.
Also an enchantment.
Right, and Gerard does play Eidolon of Blossoms, so not an irrelevant part of the card.
And as if on cue.
Eidolon of Blossoms. So there we go. That is the enchantment creature. He'll be able to draw a card off it. Also importantly, that is his 7th point of devotion on the board. So Farika will be able to attack this turn if Gerard wants it to.
And as an indestructible creature, it is a fairly safe thing to attack with.
You see there, both the snake and the Farika swinging in. They do have lifelink thanks to Whip of Erebos, so Gerard's going to repair some of that damage, moving up from 12. And Reid's in a tough spot already.
Yeah, just has stumbled on mana. His hand was very slow. Was really counting on that Corsair or Crufix to get him some early land drops. Gerard stripped it with a Thoughtseize. Reid didn't draw some lands, and now he's fallen behind.
Now, Reid still does have a lot of cards in his hand, and he is starting to hit his lands. So if he can stabilize and get enough lands, does he have answers to this? You know, can he get the Whip, the Farika off the table?
Well, the problem right now is that Gerard's attack is multidimensional. It's not just about answering the Whip of Erebos, even though that's short-term a big problem. It's also trying to contain Farika and Eidolon of Blossoms. Just a lot of different things going on right now.
Yeah, at least game 1, Reid's answers are mostly 1-for-1. There are things like Reclamation Sage, Hero's Downfall, Murderous Cut. You're right that he has answers to all of them, but it's just not sure that he can play them fast enough.
Reid's also getting clocked. I mean, he's taking a lot of damage
Yeah,
right now.
at 16.
Farika kills pretty quickly.
We'll see there. Reid's going to cast Eidolon of Blossoms. Draws a temple. And passes the turn. Remember last turn there, Reid getting rid of the Corsair of Crufix, keeping his life total as high as he can for as long as he can. Gerard, though, will continue the pressure. Here comes Doomwake Giant. It'll draw a card and shrink Reid's team.
This is all sorts of bad. I mean, that's a card plus now there's no real good blocks here. Reid can trade an Eidolon with a 1/1, or he can go ahead and take 9 points of damage.
Yeah.
Neither of these are attractive options.
Looks like he's going to go the damage route. So Reid dropping down to 7. Gerard will gain a lot of life here. And Reid's going to need a lot of blockers as Gerard just keeps the pressure on.
I think a lot of this is just a testament to the power of Farika in these kind of matchups. Once Gerard played it, Whip of Erebos was shut off for Reid, even if he could make his land drops.
Yeah, well, we saw... It's interesting just how much top decking seems like you're playing off the top of your deck in this matchup. When Reid originally Thoughtseize Gerard's hand was just lands and Satyr Wayfinders. And even when Gerard had the first whip, Reid came back with Sultai Charm. So in a sense, Gerard, it only took one card from Gerard to turn around the game, and that was really just Farika.
A big part of this is that neither of these decks kill very quickly. So, yeah, your hand might be bad, but your opponent's very unlikely to capitalize on it with a lot of pressure. Only Sidisi really blows the doors open in that sort of way.
Yeah, and
So-
actually these players I don't believe, playing Sidisi today. Just playing Sultai without her.
Just straight on the Eidolon of Blossoms build.
Mm-hmm. Well, Reid will try to stabilize here. He'll cast Doomwake Giant. That will trigger and take care of a Snake and a Satyr Wayfinder, and draw Reid a card. So he's getting his own Eidolon of Blossoms engine going. So at least as far as Doomwake and Eidolon, he's card for card with Gerard. Now Gerard has Whip and Farika, which are pretty big trumps.
Yeah, putting a creature in the graveyard here it's not sure is even that good for Reid, as that's just more food for Farika.
Right, and as you mentioned, if you got the creatures Farika makes are enchantments. So if Gerard just starts to make enchantment snakes, he can -2/-2 Reid's board, draw 2 cards. This engine is pretty powerful.
Well, Gerard's got 6 mana and 3 creatures in the graveyard, so he can Ancestral Recall, kill everything except the Doomwake Giant, kill Reid's Caryatid and Eidolon, and then attack, which is not a shabby turn.
Yeah, well, he's going to start... Looks like he may just do just that. He's going to start by making 1 snake token, draws a card and shrinks the team. Second one off Satyr Wayfinder. That'll take care of Eidolon of Blossoms. See if he goes for the third one, and indeed he does. Corsair of Crufix exiled. Sylvan Caryatid hits the graveyard on Reid's side. And while Reid had a board established, Gerard is just able to mow through it.
And now I think Reid just has to chump block this turn.
Yeah, Doomwake Giant is a 1/3, and that game will go toward Gerard. So Reid scooping that one, and 1-0, Gerard Fabiano is up a game.
And showed a lot of the power of Farika. I mean, Whip of Erebos, very good in the matchup as well, but Farika a bit of a trump. Makes the clock very quick and means that you can't really utilize your graveyard.
Well, the impressive part was just how good Farika was. Outside of life gain aside, Gerard never activated the Whip to bring a creature back, and he was never really pressured on his life total. So Whip actually didn't do too much outside of adding 2 black mana symbols to his devotion. You could just say that game was all about Farika on Gerard's side.
The Whip meant that, it does inform the way that Reid has to play certain of the turns, but yeah, Farika was everything that was going on in that game, not Whip of Erebos.
Well, we'll go ahead and go toward their sideboards here, and unsurprisingly, if we start at Gerard's sideboard, he does have a copy of Ashiok Nightmare Weaver, 2 copies of it in his deck.
He's got 2 copies of Ashiok, a Kiora, 2 Read the Bones, a Thoughtseize, a Treasure Cruise, a Sultai Charm, 1 Silence the Believers, 2 Negate, a Hero's Downfall, 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke, and 1 copy of Bioblight. So what I like in this matchup, Disdainful Stroke, very good counter against the big stuff in the matchup, Eidolon Blossoms, Whip of Erebos, and so forth. The 2 Ashioks, I think, are going to come up in here. They play a lot of the same tools, and both decks are pretty effective at blocking compared to attacking. So Ashiok makes a lot of sense. 2 copies of Read the Bones, a Thoughtseize, a Treasure Cruise, a Sultai Charm, just generic answers, generic card advantage for this kind of matchup.
Yeah, well, while those players are sideboarding, we want to talk to you about Next Level Magic as we go into 2015. That the book You Know by Patrick Chapin, a recent Pro Tour champion, has been updated for the 2015 edition. Both as paperback and ebook, they are now available on StarCityGames.com. You can learn more about this at StarCityGames.com/NLM. Remember, that stands for Next Level Magic.
A lot of updates to this text. It's also been out of print in paperbook for a very long time. So there is now a version in paperback if you want to purchase it, which has not been available, and an update which is also available in PDF form as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned in the sideboard that there's a lot of these cards like Treasure Cruise, Sultai Charm, Ashiok that come in out of the sideboard. So it seems like both players want to dig in for more of a control fight, if you would.
Both of these decks get better at fighting against one another post-board because they get answers to cards like Hornet Queen, they get counter spells for Whip of Erebos, and so trying to take this very linear approach isn't nearly as effective. It's probably going to be much more of a card advantage attrition battle post-board, and so Read the Bones and Treasure Cruise fit in very nicely. They don't make sense game 1 because this deck is trying to execute a particular game plan, but post-board, when you're going to be playing against more resistance, it makes a lot more sense to have access to just broad strokes, card advantage, removal spells, discard spells, and the like.
So when you look at their sideboards are 13 cards of overlap, where Gerard has opted for 2 copies of Ashiok. Reid has a 2nd and 3rd copy of Hero's Downfall here. And he said Ashiok is actually going to be good in this matchup, which I agree with. But how do you feel about Hero's Downfall? It is about removal, but it's a little expensive.
It's a little expensive. It's a little poor. There's not that many things that you particularly want to kill, I would say, outside of Eidolon Blossoms. I don't know if they're going to necessarily come in here.
Over on our backup feature match, Joe Lissette is looking to move to 2-0, and so far is looking good. He takes game 1 off of Invitational champion Dylan Donegan.
And if you want to go back a couple months, when Gerard and Reid played in the finals of the Open in Providence, which was standard, Gerard defeated Reid in the finals on the back of going ultimate with Ashiok. So there's some history between these two in that card. Reid electing to play 0 copies. Gerard just loves Ashiok in all sorts of matchups. And the two of them they've squared off at this sort of battle before.
Yeah, playing Ashiok in Sultai Reanimator. We saw it last season in Esper Control. I wouldn't even be shocked to see some copies of it in his Legacy deck.
I think that he's played in Legacy Opens at least one Ashiok at some point this year.
And that Planeswalker, to me, is one that has such a difference of opinion when you talk to pro players about it. There are players like Gerard who swear by it. I mean, it is a 3-mana Planeswalker, so that's where Liliana of the Veil and a lot of the really powerful Planeswalkers reside. And then you see players who don't even want it in Standard, who just don't like the card.
So I'm not a fan of the deck of the card in Blue-Black Control because you're just turning on Hero's Downfalls and other ends that would otherwise be dead. But in green decks that are able to block and are in the market for more creatures anyway, I think Ashiok can be very powerful.
Well, we are underway for game 2. Reid Duke is going to be on the play. He is down a game, and he is down a match right now. Remember, he is at 0-1 in this group phase.
We have another update that Logan Mize won 2 games to 0. So off to a great start.
Yeah, it's a 2-0 start for Logan.
Because Logan has done most of his damage on the IQ circuit, he may be perhaps the most anonymous player of our 16. But he's got a lot of chops.
All right, well, Reid not going to get stuck on 2 mana this game. He has the Sylvan Caryatid on the play this time with an untapped land. Looks like both players will be firing on mana cylinders. You see Satyr Wayfinder from Gerard. It's going to mill him for 4. No help there. Does mill a copy of the aforementioned Ashiok.
I think that Gerard is probably more depressed about milling over an Ashiok than he is about missing a land on that trigger.
Yeah, when the decks are this slow and playing cards like 0/3s and 2/4s, a turn 3 Ashiok could be pretty threatening. The Sultai deck's not able to pressure Ashiok very well.
It is also essentially Gerard's invitational card.
All right, Thoughtseize comes from Reid Duke. We get to see what Gerard's working with. You see lands number 3 and 4. On top of that, Whip of Erebos, Eidolon of Blossoms, Treasure Cruise, and Hero's Downfall. So kind of like what you mentioned, a lot of removal, a lot of card draw, and then the trump card, Whip.
And you see a lot of just subtle gamesmanship going on here. For example, Gerard last turn could have played Forest or Yavimaya Coast. He wants to at least give Reid the pause of maybe Gerard's missing blue mana when he's going about his decision making. This is all very small stuff, but at the Players' Championship, you're going to see a lot of magic like this, where it's just game of inches type of stuff.
So Reid contemplating, he can go after the card draw, he can go after the card that actually matters, which is the Whip. We'll see, he'll take care of Eidolon of Blossoms here.
Now, I was thinking that it would be Eidolon if he couldn't kill it, or Treasure Cruise if he could.
Yeah, Eidolon has the potential to draw a lot more than 3 cards if you can't kill it.
Yeah.
Draw from Gerard was another copy of Opulent Palace. He'll just make Opulent Palace and pass the turn. This is setting up for what might be a turn 4 Whip of Erebos. Or even a Treasure Cruise.
I think he would rather lead with the Treasure Cruise, because you don't want the Whip to get played and just get killed, not do very much. I think post-board, both these players are going to want to err on playing Whip only when they know the coast is clear or they have 8 mana to activate in the same turn.
Yeah, especially with the Sultai decks, Whip of Erebos is not particularly safe on the table. Both decks have a lot of ways to remove it after sideboard.
Access to cards like Reclamation Sage, Sultai Charm.
Exactly. So you see Reid, he's going to take a lull in the game as well. Gerard played a land tapped. Reid will go ahead and read the bones here, restocking his hand. And it is really just this build-up for turn 4.
Well, nothing much is going on. And as I said before, post-board, the games are going to be much more about just generating broad strokes card advantage and not trying to generate synergies as much.
Read the Bones resolves here. Post-combat land for Duke, and he'll pass back. Now we're on Gerard. Gerard drawing a copy of Farika, God of Affliction. He doesn't have to think too hard on that one. He wants to get that one down before it gets Thoughtseized.
And unlike Whip of Erebos, this is a little bit safer to run out because of Indestructible.
And the other 2 players in this bracket, last round, Gerard defeated Kent Ketter while Reid took a loss to Kevin Jones. In their other match, Ketter, the 2-0 winner, so both those players at 1-1 in the bracket. If Gerard can take a win here, he will be the sole player at 2-0.
And then things get, if Gerard were to lose this match, things get a bit messy.
Then the whole pod goes to 1-1. So in response, Gerard makes Farika. Reid will go ahead and cast Read the Bones again. Right now, there aren't actually there's only 1 creature in the graveyard for Farika.
And that might be an incentive for Reid to just be casting card drawers anyway until he's ready to do something powerful on the board.
Plays a land, and he'll just pass. He's gotten his way all up to 5 lands with really just making Sylvan Caryatid and a Thoughtseize.
Well, Gerard's not doing much, so no rush for Reid, and he's got card drawers to occupy himself with for a while.
Now he is getting behind on the board a bit here, if you read. Gerard made a Farika last turn. Gerard's going to get to make another threat here if he wants to. How concerning is this for Reid?
I don't think so, because I think the way that Reid's playing this and the respect that Gerard's showing, I think probably means he has Disdainful Stroke. He's looked at a lot of cards. He's kept on the top with a couple of his scribes. And Gerard really can't spend his entire turn casting something big to have Reid Disdainful Stroke it, untap, and play something large. Gerard's quite a bit behind in terms of the card advantage battle right now, so this Treasure Cruise that he's clutching onto is really important.
And Reid will make his own copy of Farika, leaving up that 2 mana that you mentioned represents Disdainful Stroke. And he'll pass back here. Gerard will just play a game of inches. He'll make a Death Touch Snake on the end step. seems like what Gerard needs is to make threats while still leaving up mana. And he may have done that. I believe he has another copy, his second copy of Ashiok in his hand now.
Ashiok is very nice for this matchup because it ducks under Disdainful Stroke and can't be attacked. Not susceptible to creature removal as well.
Yeah, and it also requires Reid to start committing to the board, right? He can't just sit back and let Gerard use Ashiok.
Yep.
And that's the card we have right here. You see it, Ashiok Nightmare Weaver. Out of the second copy out of the sideboard for Gerard. He'll mill 3, get 2 copies of Courser of Krufix from Reid.
And a negate as well, showing that Reid brought that in, which makes a lot of sense. A lot more spells in these decks post-board.
Gerard leaving up 2 mana, one of that is blue. And Reid has the end step Hero's Downfall.
That is one of the problems with Ashiok in this matchup, is that there really aren't that many great Hero's Downfall targets. Most things are either pretty small or, you know, they generate value when they come into play, things like Eidolon of Blossoms and Hornet Queen. Not things you want to use one-for-one removal spells on. Ashiok, on the other hand, just has a big bullseye.
Yeah, I mean, we were wondering even if Reid would board in his extra copies of Hero's Downfall, just because of the lack of targets that you mentioned. But Ashiok is a great target for it here.
It's probably good enough to leave in regardless, and I think it's definitely more than good enough to bring in against someone who's bringing some Ashioks to the table.
All right, well, Reid will finally make a threat of his own. This is Eidolon of Blossoms, so he's threatening the Eidolon-Pharika combo here to get a lot of card advantage. We'll see if Gerard can pick it apart, though.
And we saw what happened in Game 1 when that synergy got online.
Right, Gerard just ran away with the game, and at that point, it didn't matter what cards were in Reid's hand anymore. Gerard will start with an attack, though. It's one of his snake tokens coming in. We'll put Reid down to 13. Where Reid actually took 6 from himself off the cards like Read the Bones and Thoughtseize.
But life total, not likely to matter all that much.
You saw respect there on Gerard's side. He'll cast Hero's Downfall on Eidolon of Blossoms, make another land, and does pull the trigger on Treasure Cruise. He knows he's playing into Disdainful Stroke here.
But he's just got to swallow this at some point. Nothing in his graveyard matters. He does, you know, there's no creatures to reanimate or anything like that, so at some point he just has to try to do something.
Yep. I think he wanted to make sure it was really heavily discounted before he spent time on it. You know, if he got it countered, all he'd actually lose was 2 mana there.
Yep.
But it actually resolves. Gerard gets his 3 cards.
No, Reid had negated the ready there, and I think Gerard kind of could sense that that was about to happen because Reid elected not to activate the Pharika to draw anything.
Okay.
Although both graveyards were on empty.
Yeah.
So I guess there's no certainty that that was the case, but in any event, Gerard could probably detect that there was some sort of counter in Reid's hand based on the way the game's shaping up, but he's just got to try at some point.
Yeah, and I like how he took the time playing it because, like I said before, that turn he got to make Hero's Downfall. He got to do something else. So yeah, he lost his Treasure Cruise, but he didn't get time walked by Reid also.
Though the problem isn't just with the tempo of the game, it's also about the card advantage. That's the big thing right now. And now with Nykthos, Reid's also going to have a tremendous mana advantage as well. He's going to be able to leverage all the cards he's drawn.
He has had extra cards off Read the Bones. You're absolutely right. So back on Reid's turn, he makes Courser of Krufix for the turn, plays a Nykthos off the top of his deck. See another land in waiting with Llanowar Wastes. And with Gerard tapped down, Reid will now be the one to resolve Treasure Cruise as he pulls even farther ahead on cards. Land, Satyr, Wayfinder, the draws here. Now, of note, Reid, very wisely here, you could say he floated 2 green when he cast this Treasure Cruise. You notice that he tapped quite a bit for it there because he had to use the Nykthos ahead of time. So that 2 green will be able to make the Satyr Wayfinder he actually drew, and he'll get to go spin again, this time getting a Temple in his hand and flipping up another copy of Courser of Krufix.
You can really get a sense for how the game's changed post-board. I mean, the graveyard has barely been a factor for either one of these players other than to enable Treasure Cruise.
It's really coming down to the fact that Reid is just trying to get card advantage, whether it's a free card off Courser of Krufix, whether it's free creatures off Pharika, whether it's Read the Bones and Treasure Cruise. Each player just seems to be trying to get more cards than the other one. And Gerard has a big threat on the board. This is Doomwake Giant, takes care of a snake token.
I like what Gerard's trying to do here, just because he can't win the long game anymore. That ship has sailed. Reid's just drawn too many cards. But as you mentioned before, because of the Read the Bones, the Thoughtseizes, Reid has taken some points of damage. The Death Touch Snakes are a little annoying to answer outside of Doomwake Giant. So Gerard trying to beat down which is a long shot proposition, but probably better than the alternative at this point.
Right. One of the difficulties he's going to have is that Reid is currently on 5 devotion toward Farika and did draw Courser of Crufix for the turn, so he'll have the option of turning Farika into a creature. We'll see if he does that. Yeah, Reid with a full grip here. And he will play the copy of Courser of Crufix, so that's mana symbol number 7. He's going to go ahead and use the Nykthos. That makes 6 green. So we'll have 7 mana here, and that's going to be a copy of Kiora, floating 4 green. I'll use Kiora to draw a card, letting him play an additional land this turn. And Kiora's an interesting inclusion. Both players have 1 copy of her in the main deck.
And we saw last round when Brad Nelson played against Tom Ross, how much work that card did against White Blue Heroic, excuse me. All sorts of trouble in that matchup.
You see Reid, look at the setup there. He knew the Thoughtseize was on top of his deck, so he played the Kiora, minused it, then played his second land for the turn. He's able to Thoughtseize here, and he's going to snag a Whip of Erebos, it looks like, from Gerard.
Well, maybe not. I mean, Reid might just say, I don't think you can do very much with that card. Nothing going on in your graveyard, and I have a Farika to check your graveyard as well.
Yeah,
and he's going to take Commune instead.
So, if he has the answer to Whip, he might as well let Gerard have the threat he knows he can answer.
And that's an interesting little dichotomy of this matchup, is game 1, Whip of Erebos is the card, and then post-board, it has not been effective so far. Gerard has not had an opportunity to play it, and Reid certainly has not been rushing it to the table if it's in his hand.
Yeah, it's so answerable post-board that it's really about cards like Commune that, because they fuel up the graveyard, they actually have the potential to be worth more than 1 card. And Gerard will get that copy of Whip of Erebos on the table, and we'll see just how much he can do with it. It will go ahead and trigger his Doomwake Giant.
I think there's a reasonable chance he tries to go at Cure with, at the minimum, his Death Touch token and perhaps the Doomwake as well.
Over on our other feature match, Dylan Donegan and Joe Lissette. Donegan evening things up, going to game 3. Donegan playing his invitational winning Jeskai deck from last weekend. Joe Lissette on Blue-White Heroic.
Though it does seem reasonable that Reid could block out of this attack if he wanted to without giving up very much. Because Gerard cannot get to sufficient devotion for Farika, and he actually just has to pass the turn back.
Yeah, if he swings with Doomwake, it doesn't do too much for him. And now we'll see just how deep Reid can bury things. He gets to untap with a huge amount of mana, with Nykthos, with Kiora. This is going to be a big turn for him.
Yes.
Nykthos is tapped here. For green, it will make 8 mana, 4 of it used for Eidolon of Blossoms. He can draw a copy of Reclamation Sage here. And already things looking pretty good for Reid.
Again, the diversity of angles of attack, the same thing that we saw from Gerard in game 1.
Yeah, and what I like what Reid's doing here is he's leaving his Kiora activation and doing all his deck manipulation at the beginning of the turn, so that if he sees a card like perhaps this Doomwake Giant or maybe a different card that he decides he really wants, he can minus the Kiora again to go get it.
It's just good operations. And if you don't find a card you're particularly interested, you can just plus the Kiora
and save it for next turn, yeah. He's going to go ahead and exile a creature from his graveyard. That'll make a snake, draw a card, shows another Nykthos on top. Yeah, still has 3 green mana floating here. That was off that original Nykthos activation. And that's the interesting thing. These Nykthos, that these Reanimator decks, we see things like Sultai Reanimator where they start to merge with the Devotion strategy sometimes.
Well, there's a lot of overlap because the Reanimator decks often want to go to Doomwake Giant because there's a lot of enchantments in it. Once you have a lot of enchantments in the deck, then Eidolon of Blossoms becomes more attractive. Once you have Eidolon of Blossoms, Nykthos becomes more attractive for a variety of reasons. You want more mana, and you're going to be looking at a lot more cards. And so over time, the decks, as you mentioned, they have a habit of merging.
And that will be the Doomwake Giant that he drew. That's cast from Reid Duke. It will go ahead and take care of a Snake token, take care of the Satyr Wayfinder. Gerard left with just 1 blocker. That one's Doomwake Giant. Reid will draw another card from his Eidolon of Blossoms.
And this is also a sort of a demonstration of how much individual pieces of spot removal really don't matter that much, because once this deck gets its interlocking pieces in play, you're not going to break it up with a removal spell because you don't have that much tempo in the deck. And so many of these cards generate card advantage incidentally on their way that even if you kill it, it's not too hard to replace it or find something else to do.
That's just it. We see Reclamation Sage. He's going to be cast. In response, with that trigger in the stack, Gerard's going to go ahead and make a Snake token that will trigger Doomwake Giant, shrinking some of Reid's team. Then the Reclamation Sage takes down the Doomwake Giant. And we'll see just what attacks Reid wants to levy here. Other updates, Jeff Hoagland, a winner in 3 games over Ross Miriam, so both those players now at 1-1. Brian Bronduin moves to 2-0 with a victory over Derek Sheets. Sheets drops to 0-2 with the loss.
And at this stage, Gerard cannot come back by just having one piece of removal to kill something, or even one sweeper. Reid's had generated so much card advantage over the course of this game, and now has such an advantage on the board that things are looking very grim.
Yeah, it does just seem really hard for Gerard to come back here. He has fewer cards in his hand, fewer cards on the board. It just seems like he can't make enough resources. And I think part of that's due to the fact that he doesn't have a Nykthos, so he doesn't have enough mana symbols for a Nykthos to be good. He's just not playing with the same kind of resources that Reid is.
When your opponent's drawing a bunch of cards, you have to win quickly. Gerard was not equipped to do that, and now we're seeing the consequences. We saw those Read the Bones early on. They look kind of innocuous, but we're seeing what happens as a result now 5 or 6 turns later.
Other players moving to 2-0, that would include Brad Nelson. He wins this round as well, defeating Chris Van Meter. For Van Meter, that's an 0-2 start, digging a bit of a hole.
Great start for Brad, who had a pretty tight match against Tom round 1. We'll
see the draw was Hero's Downfall from Gerard. He'll take care of Doomwake Giant. And he's holding off the attack here, but it seems just like with this Nykthos available and Eidolon of Blossoms in conjunction with Farika, it's going to be hard for him to keep Reid at bay for much longer.
Gerard's got 0 or 1 cards in his hand right now. A Whip of Erebos is not worth very much. A Farika with very limited resources facing down a sea of cards.
Draw from Reid. Yeah, and a lot of this, there's a lot of positioning here that once, it does seem like you need to get ahead on cards in hand. We saw that work really well for Reid as he took off, turns 3 and 4 to just cast Read the Bones. But at the same time, the board seems to matter here because once Reid gets far enough ahead on the board, it just doesn't seem like Gerard has very much play.
No, it's about card advantage and less about the graveyard synergies because both decks are much more equipped to answer it post-board.
Well, Gerard tried to block there. He went for a Snake token, but Reid had a Hero's Downfall at the ready. So he'll crash in with creatures and put Gerard at a pretty low life total here. It's not lethal this turn, but he knocks Gerard down to 3.
Yeah, and Reid can just pass it back. Doesn't even have to do anything. I'm sure he's got cards in his hand he could potentially cast, but not much to be gained.
Gerard hoping for something. Plays a Courser that he drew, shows Doomwake Giant. That will not be enough, and we're on to game 3 here.
26 minutes left in the round for 2 relatively slow decks. Both players had a crisp pace of play.
Yeah, well, you do see with these whip decks, it's very possible that games can get drawn out. Both players' life totals can start going up in the mid game.
Though I think that's less commonly the case post-board, where Whip of Erebos does not run away nearly as frequently. But the games can take a very long time. I think that's more likely to be the case in, say, an Abzan Reanimator Mirror match because there's so many Siege Rhino triggers and Hornet Queen makes attacking and blocking prohibitive. Here, because Doomwake Giant plus Eidolon of Blossoms completely invalidates what's going on the other side of the table if they don't have some sort of analog, that the games end a little bit faster than you see in the Abzan matchups.
And you see here, right now, covering the group stage of the Players' Championship, Matthias Hunt and Patrick Sullivan. We have a match going to Game 3 between Reid Duke and Gerard Fabiano. Both players currently in Group C. Gerard opening up with a win, Reid falling to Kevin Jones. He picked up a loss.
The magnitude of every match is amplified so much when you're playing in these small group stages because right now, if Gerard wins, he's in a great position to win the stage.
He's the only 2-0 player, as Ketter defeated Jones this last round.
So that's a great start there. For Reid, a loss here means that he is in a ton of trouble already.
Absolutely.
Just 2 rounds in. If Reid wins this matchup, then the whole group is a cluster, and the next round matters a lot for how things are going to shake out. But a lot riding on this game already, and that's something in contrast to even the invitationals where, you know, you lose round 2, okay, whatever, life goes on. Here, it could mean that you're out of the tournament very, very quickly.
And I've talked to some of the players. I got to do, what is it? This was from Joe Lissette, came to me after the match, and he said he had never been felt so much pressure in a round 1 of a tournament before.
I think that's true of a lot of players in this tournament. It was certainly true of me. I mean, it's just, everything is amplified.
Yeah.
There's 16 players for 50 grand, $20,000 for first prize. You know, getting bounced early, still $500. Not a bad weekend, but relative to what you're thinking about going into the tournament, relative to the preparation that you're spending, all of it, and you know, would be a really disappointing tournament.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has this eliminator feel to it. A lot of times, even if you have a slow start, you can maybe play out, hope to finish in like the middle of the pack. But here, we have a field of 16, and slowly that field gets whittled down until you only have 1 player.
And all these players know each other. You know, there's no mysteries in this tournament too, because they're all familiar with each other from the Open Series. So a lot of familiarity. The matches are really magnified. There's no easy outs.
Yeah, they know each other, have match histories with each other. A lot of players, was it Ross Merriam, said ahead of time he already felt like he knew the deck lists of his opponents just by knowing who the player was.
In fact, at dinner yesterday, I believe the 2 players on screen mentioned to me that soon they will be going together to a Modest Yahoo concert up in Sugarloaf, New York.
All right.
So very familiar with each other.
Yeah, these 2 guys working together for the event. Did get placed in the same group, so still have to battle it out.
And Reid's stoicism, a really nice pairing with Gerard's benign craziness. one of my favorite duos in Magic.
All right, well, we get to start with Gerard on the play. He has Opulent Palace, so does Reid Duke. Back to Gerard. He will have a turn 2 mana creature. That's going to be Sylvan Caryatid.
I think Gerard might have an opening here of a turn 3 Eidolon of Blossoms and start the card advantage engine rolling.
Yeah, he talked just so much about how important card advantage was here. He did have that option, but said he's going to go look to pick apart Reid's hand. He'll Thought Seize and see a pair of Courser of Crewfix, a Doomwake Giant, an Eidolon of Blossoms, and a Sultai Charm from Reid.
Sources of card advantage and answers. A little less fidgety post board.
Yeah, that seems like the kind of hand you'd really want. It's got a lot of card advantage. It's got some answers. It has enough lands, and it even has a Nykthos in case things go really well.
And durability against Thoughtseize is a nice element too.
Yeah, if there was only 1 Courser, you think Gerard would take it here?
Most likely. I mean, then, you know, Reid's probably doing nothing again on the 3rd turn.
With 2 of them, I feel like the equation changes.
I think Eidolon of Blossoms becomes much more attractive to take, and Gerard draws the same conclusion.
Yeah, he'll play a 2nd Opulent Palace and a 2nd Sylvan Caryatid. So Gerard's down on cards, but he's up really heavily on land right now.
And if he can leverage this mana through Eidolon of Blossoms, then it doesn't really matter that, you know, Reid's got more cards in hand. It's about capitalizing on the mana advantage right now. Tough to do in this matchup because, again, both players have a lot of answers to everything, and it takes the matchup's slow, but...
Yeah. Courser of Crewfix was the play for Reid. He has a forest waiting on top of his deck.
Gerard also knows that the coast right now is clear for Ashiok.
Yeah, he has with a pair of O3s. He did see Reid's hand. It's going to have another Courser. It's another Courser in it. It has a Sultai Charm, which answers most of the things that Gerard could do, but you're absolutely right. None of those things answer Ashiok right now. And it looks like Gerard does have one of those in his hand.
Gerard is not the type of man to turn down an Ashiok. On a board this attractive, he could play his Llanowar Waste. He can leave up 1 Caryatid to block.
Yeah, that would really be pressing his mana advantage because his mana is also blockers. Sylvan Caryatid doing double duty there. You see he's shuffling that Ashiok to the front of his hand. Exactly what you mentioned, Llanowar Wastes. But it's going to be Eidolon of Blossoms, actually, the play right now.
And this just may be a concession to mana efficiency as well.
Yeah, I mean, Reid has to kill it, right?
Most likely.
Top card for Reid is Satyr Wayfinder. He does have the Sultai Charm to answer Eidolon of Blossoms, but it would cost him his whole turn to make it. Reid's hand seems pretty stocked, but it doesn't curve out nearly as well as Gerard's. It seems like he's stuck on one spell.
Well, until he starts spinning some lands with the Corsair Crewfix, it's just a 2/4, which is not a card you would be going out of your way to play in this matchup.
Right. Reid will go ahead and attack with Corsair Crewfix. He plays land 4. Looks like it'll be a copy of Sultai Charm to take care of the Eidolon of Blossoms, trying to keep Gerard's card advantage under control, leaving Gerard with just mana if he can. Now they pass back. We'll see where Gerard goes from here. Needs to stick something. He'll start with a Temple. It does look like he's going to go for Ashiok this turn.
And I think that he may have Disdainful Stroke back up as well.
So what are the ways, we saw last game Reid answered a Ashiok with Hero's Downfall. What other ways does he have to deal with it?
I mean, there's negates, there's the Hero's Downfall that you just alluded to, and there's attacking. The third one being the hardest to do in this matchup.
Ashiok comes on, it'll plus taking 3 creatures, all mana creatures from Reid. Yeah, Ashiok's at 5, and Reid, unless he has that Hero's Downfall in his hand and the black mana to be able to cast it, doesn't look like he'll be able to take care of this Ashiok very easily. And Gerard will go with Reid the Bones as another card here. So Reid knows there's no counter magic just yet. But Gerard's going to, I would assume, find a way to either protect the Ashiok or make a different threat.
And you mentioned it's really important for Gerard to take advantage of his mana advantage, and he's done just that. This is a great turn of deploying Ashiok, which is problematic for Reid to answer unless he has Hero's Downfall, which seems unlikely based on Gerard's earlier Thoughtseize. And now he's casting Reid the Bones as well.
All right, so we'll be back to Duke. Draw for the turn. He has Eidolon of Blossoms on top of the deck, but hoping to create some pressure on Gerard's new Planeswalker here. Full grip of cards, but he's down on the board right now.
And Eidolon Blossoms is a really problematic card for Reid to see here because not only is it not a land, but it means Ashiok next turn is going to get that Eidolon, which is a draw Reid would like to have, and really nice for Gerard to have access to as well.
Yeah, he'd like to keep Gerard off that Eidolon of Blossoms if possible. Maybe if he has a Scry land or a fetch land, he could get it off the top of his deck. Of course, there's this interesting interaction with Ashiok where you get to see cards, but you're not the one who gets them.
Players playing with close to perfect information as the game draws on when they both have Corsair.
Reid will play a second Corsair, then make Nykthos, gaining 2, passing the turn. So it looks like Gerard will get the Eidolon, but if with this Nykthos and the 2 Corsairs, maybe Reid can match Gerard's mana advantage?
Potentially, though the Corsairs there's no guarantee are going to be sticking around.
Yeah, I do see Gerard with Hero's Downfall among the cards in his hand. And he's going to try to pick apart Reid's hand here. It's a Thoughtseize. He sees Silence the Believers, Doomwake Giant, and Reid the Bones.
It wouldn't surprise me if Reid the Bones is the one that gets selected out of this hand. Gerard might feel like he can weather the storm of, 1-for-1 removal spells, a Doomwake Giant he can probably just kill, and Gerard draws the same conclusion.
Yeah, he takes Reid the Bones. So you think if he knows he can beat both of these cards, there's no reason to take something different?
He might be able to apply enough pressure to Reid just with one creature in play that the Silence the Believers is not going to get more than one thing. And the Doomwake Giant is really innocuous, especially if Gerard has a removal spell.
Well, Reid draws a land for the turn. Gerard knows about that. Top card is another Corsair of Crewfix. But Reid, yeah, Silence the Believers and Doomwake Giant, the 2 cards in his hand. He does have a lot of mana available to him. See what he wants to do here. He's going to start with a swing with the Corsairs.
Now, keep in mind, Gerard knows about the Doomwake Giant, so
Right.
he's just not going to shove his 2 Caryatids in front of the Corsairs.
And he will take one of them. Block 1, Ashiok drops down to 5. So at least for the time being, it looks like Reid he'll have the creature advantage, but it seems tenuous right now.
Especially if Gerard can follow up with some sort of removal spell. Then the Ashiok can either continue to mill Reid or go get this Eidolon of Blossoms.
Yeah. That post-combat Doomwake Giant took down Sylvan Caryatid. Gerard then Hero's Downfalled it, so as you mentioned there, he does have the removal spell. And Gerard will put his Ashiok down to 1 to take that Eidolon of Blossoms that he milled the previous turn.
Now here's the issue. Do you keep deploying more targetable creatures into the Silence the Believers?
Yeah, he's got to be concerned about it. Silence the Believers, Reid will at least have 1 target for it. Reid has a ton of green mana. It's unclear whether or not how many times Reid can strive it.
So the bigger issue here is that Gerard's likely to lose the Ashiok unless he has another removal spell, because Reid is generating so much mana that it doesn't even matter if Gerard deploys more creatures to the table. Most likely they all get swept up in the Silence the Believers.
And he'll make a second copy of Ashiok and mill again here.
And that's, this is the reason why, because he can't protect that Ashiok any further. And a couple goodies there for Gerard.
Yeah, 2 Eidolon of Blossoms, a second copy of Eidolon, and Reclamation Sage, all milled from that Ashiok. And now Reid, instead of drawing another Courser this turn, he's going to draw Sylvan Caryatid. Top card is a Thoughtseize.
Not too bad for Gerard, as he's going to be able to play mostly empty-handed. Now, still annoying that Silence of the Believers is hanging out in Reid's hand. It does constrain a little bit of Gerard's development right now.
Yeah, both Coursers will attack on in. Trying to take care of that Ashiok. Reid doesn't want to fall behind in the board. Gerard, as before, blocks 1. Ashiok down to 3. Sylvan Caryatid out of Reid.
And I think Reid is kind of has identified the same thing that Gerard has identified, which is it's hard for Gerard to do too much explosive stuff with the Silence the Believer still in hand. So there's no reason for him to silence the Believers the Eidolon right now, because Reid can probably play catch up no matter what Gerard does.
Yeah. Well, Gerard, in the meantime, he's just going to protect his Ashiok. His play was Courser of Krufix. That's the second wall he has here, and a source of card advantage for him.
This is pretty annoying for Reid, because it's not good for Reid for this to resolve. It's another card. He might not get another look at it. He might look at a land here with the Courser. But is that good enough on its own to induce Silence the Believers on the Eidolon, given how much it's probably keeping Gerard's hand in check?
Well, it's probably going to have to. So Gerard drew a card off Courser, and one of the cards he drew was Thoughtseize. So Gerard's going to make the Thoughtseize right now. So if Reid wants to cast Silence the Believers, he had better do it in response to this spell.
And I think he's going to, and part of the reason is because he knows that Reid is drawing a Thoughtseize of his own. So Gerard just wants to cast his hand. He wants to get the Doomwake Giant out of there. So this forces the action. And now Doomwake's able to come to play, and Gerard with a substantial advantage on the board. No hand for the Thoughtseize that Reid is about to draw, and Ashiok still in play.
And he'll go ahead and make Doomwake Giant as his last card for the turn there. So both players playing off the top right now.
And this is an odd spot for Gerard. Do I plus the Ashiok and maybe get to the ultimate or give myself more wiggle room to hit big stuff, or do I just let Reid draw a Thoughtseize right now?
Yeah, Gerard has no cards in hand. It's not too bad. And I think that's exactly what you mentioned here. He just lets Reid draw for the turn.
And I think Gerard is definitely going to mill that one away.
Treasure Cruise, if this match is anything about card advantage. Reid did get a free land there. So the Yavimaya Coast came in that turn. And now we have both players. They have very similar boards looking at each other. This is going to be a test just how good is Ashiok here. I mean, they both have empty hands. They both have Coursers. Reid has one more Courser. Gerard has a Doomwake Giant, so
well, the mixture of Courser Krufix on Reid's side of the table has given Gerard perfect information to work with here with this Ashiok, which is helping a lot.
I mean, Ashiok is the difference right now between these two boards.
It's putting, pressure on Reid. He's already gotten an Eidolon of Blossoms out of the deal. And it's just another dimension of attack.
Satyr Wayfinder from Gerard. This one also misses. Milling copies of Disdainful Stroke and Kiora. And Reid, Temple waiting on top of his deck. Plays a land for the turn.
Now, see, this is a spot where Gerard might switch it up next turn and get a creature with the Ashiok and leave Reid withdrawing a Temple.
And he'll do just that. See if he does that. Draws Hero's Downfall for the turn. Gerard content just to sit back.
Yep. Different lines of play here. You can keep trying to squeeze this Ashiok a little bit further, or even just go get a Doomwake Giant. Really start applying pressure.
Well, is there any reason for Gerard to even build up toward Ashiok's ultimate? It
Not-
exiles Reid's hand and graveyard.
Not really.
So if anything, Ashiok seems to just be milling Reid. And that may be enough.
Yep. So yeah, again, Gerard switching it up here says, go ahead and draw a Temple next turn. I'll take this Eidolon of Blossoms.
Yep. For the second time this game, we see Ashiok letting Gerard play Reid's copies of Eidolon of Blossoms. Draw for Reid was a blue-black Temple. He will play it. Gain 2. Thoughtseize on top. He'll scry that one away. See what's in waiting. It's Windswept Heath.
Gerard just has so much control over Reid's draw step right now. Reid can't get to the Ashiok. Gerard isn't compelled to plus it. He doesn't have to every single time. And it's been a really long time since Reid's had a good draw step.
So if you're Gerard, do you think, is your plan to just mill?
I think my plan is for as long as Reid lets me, I'm going to try to strand him with bad draws. Because right now with Doomwake plus Eidolon plus Courser, Gerard's draw steps are so much better. So as long as Disaster doesn't strike, Reid's just giving it up.
Scoop it up. And so you have it, 2-1. Gerard Fabiano will take down the match. That moves him to 2-0 and in sole possession of first place over in the C bracket. And for Reid Duke, a 0-2 start means he's very likely to be playing for elimination this morning.
And in a replay of what we saw in the Standard Providence Finals, Gerard doing all sorts of work with Ashiok. I mean, game 2 was pretty anemic. Just